Cedric, many thanks for the hospitality, as we heard. Dear audience, Karlovsky, so, indeed, the main concern, as Tal said, of my discussion today is providing a Nas, Fassung version, Hebrew version, but also Aramaic perhaps, or therefore also a Semitic one, Hebrew, Arabic, of crisis. Thinking Mashber, mainly quoting its Talmudic sources and biblical exegesis. So in this Nosach, or version, the question of crisis is framed while affiliated with birth, namely with delivery, transmission, Überlieferung, Mesira, even Masoret. Crisis in Hebrew, Mashber, is associated in this context with a maternal body and with a mother tongue, or acts of mother tongue. The Hebrew version of crisis thus aims at a certain concept of Masoret tradition based on maternal delivery that may serve as an echo chamber of the metaphysical concept of crisis following the Greek krino, that is, of crisis and critique. In the first section of this conversation, it offers a short discussion of Mashber according to the Hebrew Aramaic sources, and deals mainly with inner dialectic of this term, referring both to disaster, failure of birth, suffering, pain, but also to care or taking care, response, and mercy, rachamim, out of rachem. In the second section, we discuss both short but rather major interpretations of crisis in physical construction of subjectivity, while being interrupted by the Mashber. So it's not like arguing about two traditions or counter-traditions, rather Mashber comes as an interruption, not only as an echo, but as an act of interference in the metaphysical structure of crisis. However, in short epilogue of this conversation, we attempt an act of self-critique while dealing with the gender contradictions or gender inversions, concealment and resistance, being also embodied in Mashber or in the Nosach of Mashber. So first, let me open with this word as it mentioned, for example, in the Hebrew Bible. So it says in the book of the Kings, Yom Tzara v'tochacha na'atza היום הזה כי באו בנים עד משבר וכוח עין ללידה. There is a day of trouble and of rebellion. Listen, for the children are come to the birth, and there is not strength to bring forth. So Mashber is considered as a birth. The verse is recited in the book of Isaiah, and Rabbi Solomon Yitzchaki, the Rashi of the 12th century, read it as follows: עת צרה, אדומה לאישה היושבת על המשבר, ואין כוח לבלד לצאת. The day of trouble, similar to a woman who sits in the chair of delivery, and the newborn has no strength to come out. And Rabbi Kimchi, Radak of the 13th century, argues, המשיל הצרה לאישה אשר יאחזו חבליה, ובא הבן עד המשבר והוא הרחם, מקום יציאת הוולד, כי אז חבליה יותר קשים, כשהוולד קרוב לצאת. While Rashi follows Mishnah and Gemara to read Mashber as a chair, a seat for the woman to deliver, Radak offers to read Mashber as a limb, opening of the womb, the body of the woman giving birth. Eliezer ben Yehuda follows those two readings or interpretations in his New Hebrew Dictionary to read Mashber, so crisis, as both pi harechem, the mouth or the opening of the womb, and the chair of delivery. הכיסא שהיולדת יושבת בשעת הלידה. So the biblical verse refers to Mashber as a site of birth, or associated with day of trouble. It carries with it eschatological implications. We already heard in the opening lecture of the messianic potential. Hagi put attention to the eschatological catastrophic implications that differ, but nevertheless become also an echo of messianic potential. It's also in Mashber, it lies in the context of the Mashber, of the crisis. Mashber, we are referring to beginning possibility of new life also implies disaster, failure, a prophecy of destruction. In the coming midrashim, I will follow where is Ruth, a dialogue of Ruth, wonderful book. The Mishnah refers to a woman who sits on Mashber, as it reads, the seat of birth. In a certain context, discussing the case of a woman who was sentenced to death. Look at that. Saying that if she already sits on the chair, the Mashber, namely, she is about to give birth, then the performance of judgment, again, crisis, we remember this word, right? Is deferred until delivery. So not until the coming day, not until the other day, until delivery. A few hours per us, a few days. Mashber is a foresight, an expectation of life and birth, but associated already with judgment, day of judgment, right? And with sentence of death. Different midrashim refer to the double implication of Mashber as a message of death and death. So, it's not about the binary of the dichotomy of life and death, it's always together. Crisis, an opening of suffering, of sorrow, and of hope, with the same breath. So it says, for example, במדרש רבה on דברים. יענך אלוהים ביום צרה, הקדוש ברוך הוא ביום צרה. מהו ביום צרה? אמר ריש לקיש. למה הדבר דומה? לאישה שישבה על המשבר לילד, והייתה מצטערת לילד, אמרו, מי שענה את אמך, הוא יענה אותך. almost like יענה אותך. but יענה אותך, response to it. אמר משה לפני הקדוש ברוך הוא, ריבונו של עולם, כשתהיה רואה את בניך בצער, ואין מי שיבקש רחמים עליהם, מיד ענה אותם. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, משה, חייך, בכל שעה שיקראו אותי, אני אענה אותם, אענה להם. So Midrash asked, and God will answer you on the day of trial. So on the day of Mashber. What is the day of trial? It says, it's like a woman sitting on Mashber, the chair of the living. In pain, she sits. The one who answers to your mother, they say to her, will answer your prayer. And so was God respond to Moses, who asked for mercy upon the children of Israel, and says, he will answer the call at any hour. Almost this today, this hour. So there's temporal structure to this, to the response of the prayer. So crisis is embodied, represented by a woman while giving birth. She embodies the sorrow, the trouble of the people. Her body, the womb, is a sign of a collective body, a body of a community, a political body. At that same hour, the day of trouble, one should expect the prayer to be answered, a response. The opening of the maternal body is that of mercy, or in Hebrew, rechem v'rachamim. In another midrash, we read, it is ball of a woman, the me'i, the womb, is made of skin and ropes, uliot v'chavirim. And when she sits, the woman in the chair, again, the mashber, the crisis, she doesn't throw her baby all at once, but gradually. The Talmudic subject of mashber is not being thrown into the world, in die Welt verworfen, but rather deliver gently. So not crisis, rupture and pain, chevlei lidah, are associated with the act or the threat of delivery, but also affiliations, bonding. Mashber, the Hebrew or Nosach, Semitic version of crisis, also affiliated with vocality, certain voice. The voice of the woman while giving birth is a voice of pain, groaning, yelling. Itself also is a vocal of lament and of joy. We mentioned that the other day. In what sense it's also an opening of lamentation. But not the mother alone, but also of the unborn. Right? So it's not the mother alone. Right. It's not the baby, the not yet birth, right? Of the birth is also already in lament. In the book of Zohar, read the Midrash, itself of a Talmudic reference, on voices. The voices that are not to be lost in the world. It tells on the voices of Torah and the voices of prayer that raise to heaven. But who needs them, right? There are also voices that are left to us, humans on earth. And this word also do not perish, and one includes in them the voice of a woman while sitting on a chair, right, on Mashber. It's a voice of a man, woman, while dying, it's two, while his soul leaves the body, so it's another voice of equal Mashber, and the voice of the snap, while its skin is taken off. So it's the woman giving birth, the body of a man dying, that of a snap. The voices of sorrow wandering in the air and finally are hidden in ravens and dust and rise again in the same echo of the human voice. So the Mashber has an origin of foundational voice and expression that become an echo of what is the human condition. So let's offer a short summary of this first section. Time is fine? Okay, thank you. So Mashber is an opening, a rupture, a cut, a sign, but of a woman body. So it's concrete in that sense. It's physical. It's a cut of the maternal body. Mashber, by referring to a chair, so it isn't an object, right? But it's a seed, side of birth, signifying a moment of beginning, delivery, perhaps even open tradition. But tradition as such is not what is given from father to son alone. So it's not only these rumors that fathers say it's halacha mipi av leben. Namely studying mitzvot, halachot, norms, but different delivery. That even before the law, not in the Kafkaism, but before the name of the father. Not as an act by the name of the father alone, but as a mother tongue. So Mashber, a delivery at crisis, is associated with a danger, a day of trouble. Those are imminent to the hour of birth, which is a delay too. It's on the mouth, right? It's still in delay. And there's danger to the motherly body. And all things which come into the world are thus broken or at a break. The separation from the motherly body, however, is not a cross, ashlocha, but a delivery. Mashber is not a break, a void, but also a place, a room, a house, a space of response, perhaps also of comfort. And if we are associating womb, rechem, as an origin of care and mercy, rachamim, not violence alone, or perhaps what kind of violence involves anxieties and death, but also joy and welfare are having their parts. Mashber is an origin of a feminine voice, but called perhaps an echo of sorrow that serves to express states of human being in the world, a vocal of what life is, to live and to suffer and not without joy. And it's applied when it's applied to the chair of delivery, is not unassociated with the divine throne, chair of God. For God itself is not a father alone, it's not that bears in its body feminine, maternal aspects. So the Hebrew nosach of crisis, what Mashber is, provides us the critical concept that all certain dialect, perhaps not a German one, not an Half Hebrew, right? Not a synthetic, an absolute dialectic of life and death, of disaster and birth, separation and response, and such that this version of crisis may provide us with a method of interference while associated with major terms of crisis and critique. So in the next section, perhaps, I can skip because it's not green, but I think we already heard that. I'll make it that short, with your permission. So on green, on critique and crisis. Why we need this Hebrew nosach of crisis, referring to maternal bodies, an opening, a rupture, separation, but holding together an origin of pain and of care can serve, let's say, as a substance of delivery, provide us with a method of interference, while discussing the concept of crisis in Western tradition, but also in Jewish traditions. Those traditions are associated, with the Greek krino, implying separation, split, a break that refers also to the condition of critical thought. Western philosophy is anchored in translations of krino into metaphysical construction of crisis, in which not only the initial condition of thinking is found, also the epistemological condition of the subject. Western subjectivity as a metaphysical construction is grounded in crisis. Rupture, separation of subject and object creates the condition of thinking about, reflecting, observing, looking at. The crisis, separation of subject and object, again, makes critique possible. In this context, we recall the state of cogito, a modern example, a philosophical subject that reflects its own being, but not only out of doubt, but in doubt, but due to radical separation from the body, from the senses, from its surrounding. In Immanuel Kant's critical writing, the very idea of critique and of all time are associated with the crisis as an epistemological condition. By the young Hölderlin and by a few of the leading thinkers of German idealism, concepts of all time referring to the initial split, separation, implying judgment, belong also to the semantic field of crisis, separation and affinity. Those concepts need, of course, precise situation, historical context too, for the concept of crisis in the German schools around 1800 were associated with historical events, right? The revolution in Paris, the age of terror, the defeat in Jena, the Napoleon occupations, and after. The German thought as much as being critical, dialectic, or even tragic, to follow Peter Zondi in his thought of Grino, or Martin Heidegger's writing, although the well-known efforts to overcome the same metaphysical structure of Western philosophy are in attempts to step back into forgotten layers of the Greek tradition, reconstructing again what logos is, again a gathering, the house of being, birth, is still obligated to the concept of crisis, split, rise, downfall, Untergang. So interruption in the metaphysical scheme of crisis following the version of משבר doesn't suggest, as I tried to say, an alternative mode of thinking. No. Neither he offers an ethical turn, nor an act of contradiction. The Hebrew משבר is too much associated with rupture, power, violent separation, and death danger itself, right? However, it seems that those Talmudic versions of crisis are not yet abstract and conceptual alone, but rather embodied, performed, while affiliated with feminine, gendered, even transgendered figure, discussing crisis not without the Hebrew Aramaic corpus that is based on material interruption, concrete inversions, sense of pain, vocality, attentiveness, but also illusions, care, responsibility, moments of silence. It hints for us on different operations of tradition. A delivery not being consumed by conceptual order, but rather confused by its genders. The Hebrew Nusach doesn't provide yet a corrected form of crisis. Mashber rather implies transfiguration, or to some degree again, transgendered, dialogical form of crisis. Mashber is how crisis is being translated into, performed in Brecht through Hebrew and Aramaic. Now, short Thank you. The discussions of Mashber turn in Hebrew sources to female embodiments. Biblical interpretations of the Talmudic Midrash seem, however, to reclaim the feminine body, transforming into a vehicle of hermeneutic practice. The mouth of a vamp, Yarechem, turns into the mouth of Talmudic conversation. Like Chachamim. However, it seems that the Midrash takes over the chair of delivery and sits on it, right? While discussing prophecies of the Day of Judgment. Those acts are associated with gender inversions, tensions, and soul, but also with attraction to the feminized body as a cut, an opening, which to follow again, Hélène Sixou, is rather often associated in tradition with horror and objection, right? It's not only attraction, but also objective, limb, recher, wrong. Our own discussion, while anchored in certain Talmudic tradition, or as a reference or hearing it, is not free from hermeneutic maneuver, progressive perhaps, you should say, yet tied to an act of over-interpretation and appropriation. I'm very much aware of it. Discussion of משבר is an opening, a cut of a motherly body signifying what we may call a mother tongue of tradition. In the literary, however, that which demands response, taking care of, is left also as a foreign word in that realm of language. For something is left unheard in the act of delivery, in the moment of משבר. Something is left yet unheard, not even as a concept, not yet a word. Also in the Talmudic context, something that doesn't let itself become or being translated between Aramaic, Hebrew, and the Western languages. Something escapes this frame of discussion. So refusing to be consumed by interpretation, escaping conceptual efforts of domestication, resisting scholarship too, at least in its disciplinary implications. משבר is rather a voice, a theme, an expression of fragility too. It therefore not yet a word, but a groan, a cry, and therefore not even a sign, but rather a sigh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.